Here are videos that capture the terrifying moments before it all ended. From a stunt that went horribly wrong to the final moments captured before a plane crash. I've put together some of the most horrifying videos that are bound to make you shudder. Let's dive in. Elevator murder. In the early morning of July 22, 2018, 29-year-old Tatiana Spitzner would face horrific events that would shock the whole of Brazil. Even worse, security footage captured her chilling ordeal, reigniting conversations about femicide and the abuse that happens behind closed doors. So Tatiana was a lawyer who lived with her husband Luis Felipe Manvallier, a 32-year-old university professor. The two had been married for 2 years, and in the night of the incident, they were spotted in their car as Luis is seen continuously hitting and dragging Tatiana out very aggressively. He then pins her against the car while he strangles her neck. Next, we see her running around the parking lot toward the elevator, extremely scared, while Luis chases her down. As she gets into the elevator, he immediately enters and pins her against the wall very aggressively. He continues to assault her in full view of the camera, dragging her back violently as she is still trying to escape from him. Unfortunately, this would be the last time Tatiana Spitzner would be seen alive. Next, the footage would show Tatiana's body falling from the 4th floor balcony and landing on the street with a thud. But that's not even the worst of it, as the footage gets increasingly disturbing. Luis is next seen once again in the elevator, but this time he is dragging what seems to be Tatiana's dead body. Next, he's seen wiping down the floor and elevator completely covered in blood before attempting to flee. When the police eventually captured the man, he had guts to claim that she willingly jumped from the balcony, even though the autopsy report showed that she had died from strangulation. She also had a fractured hyoid bone and visible bruising around her neck and face. There was literally nothing about her death that showed it was suicide. Neighbors and friends even testified that Tatiana had mentioned several times that she was scared of her husband, and there were various signs of past abuse. In fact, on the night of this horrible murder, they had heard screaming for over 15 minutes before her body hit the pavement. In May 2022, after years of legal proceedings and intense public scrutiny, Luis Felipe Manvallier was convicted of femicide, unlawful imprisonment, and tampering with a crime scene. He was sentenced to 31 years in prison. MV Shaul Ferry disaster. This unimagined grief would send shockwaves across the whole world, mainly in Korea, as over 300 students from Danwon High School in Seoul sank in the sea on April 16, 2014.
통보합니다. 주문, 피청구인 대통령 박근혜를 파면한다.
You see, the MV Shaul ferry was a South Korean ferry built in 1994 but was modified to carry cargo and passengers. However, on many occasions, the ferry would illegally overload cargo when running routes between Incheon and Jeju Island. On the day of this heartbreaking tragedy, the ferry left Incheon with 476 people on board, mostly high school students from Danwon High School, on a field trip to Jeju Island. And as usual, it was overloaded with cargo. At exactly 8:48 a.m., the ferry suddenly tilted to one side near Jindo Island in a maneuver known as sharp turn to port. The only problem was that this maneuver was done completely wrong. And since the ferry was already at a pretty high speed, the overloaded cargo that wasn't even tied down properly entirely shifted to the port side of the ferry. The man at the wheel couldn't reverse the mistake, and just like that, the ship started to capsize. However, instead of helping the kids escape to safety, the crew members asked them to stay put. In the video, you can repeatedly hear them tell the kids to remain calm and stay put because it was dangerous. Sadly, the kids obeyed, while the captain and crew members saved themselves, leaving hundreds to drown. However, what they didn't realize was that most of the kids inside the cabin had started filming the entire ordeal. The footage was recovered from their phones after their bodies were found, and it was released to the public. The videos are extremely disturbing and literally record in real time how these poor kids died. Some footage shows water creeping up the floors and their laughter turning into nervousness.
이런 상황에서 막 그러지 않냐? 안전하니까 가만히 있으라고. 그리고 죽이는 거야. 영어 다 그러지. 그 지하철도 그랬어.
There were even several 199 calls made in distress to the Coast Guard, but like everything that went wrong that day, the response to those calls were slow and very disorganized.
왜 살려주세요? 배가 침몰되는 것 같아요. 배가 침몰해요? 네, 여기 제주도 가고 있었는데 예. 여기 지금 배가 배에서 떨어진 것 같아요, 지금. 잠깐만요. 자, 지금 타고 보신 배가...
Some students, still in their life jackets, were seated and waiting for instruction. One even recorded a goodbye message to his parents. Internal footage also caught the crew abandoning ship. Some were even changing clothes so they wouldn't be recognized. Out of the 476 people on board, only 172 survived. The death toll was a staggering 304, with 250 of them being students. The captain was later found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison, while the other crew members received hefty sentences as well. Jeffrey Spade snow shoveling incident. Just before 9 a.m. on Monday, Plains Township police officers responded to a report of multiple shots fired in a residential neighborhood. And when they arrived, it was a shocking, brutal scene for everyone. 50-year-old James Goy and his 48-year-old wife Lisa Goy were both lying dead in the street in front of their home with multiple bullet wounds scattered all over their bodies. According to the neighbors, the couple had been shoveling snow from their front yard that morning and throwing it onto their neighbor's property, 47-year-old James Spade. Both parties exchanged mean expletives, and James is repeatedly seen calling Spade a pussy while walking toward him with raised fists, while his wife stands beside him in support.
You! I'll make your life live in hell living here, cat. You're a pussy! Fuck you! Go ahead! Go ahead!
In response, Spade retreated into his home, retrieved a handgun, and shot both James and Lisa Goy point blank multiple times. He then went back inside, returned with another firearm, and proceeded to shoot them again to make sure they were both actually dead. While 911 was called immediately by the neighbors, one more gunshot was heard inside Spade's apartment after he had gone back inside. Later, during the interview, the police told the public that Spade had shot himself fatally after committing the double homicide. It was just a really sad situation all around, and sparked discussions on various platforms about the potential consequences of unresolved conflicts and the importance of community mediation and mental health support. Decated during stunt. On May 25th, 1987, experienced Belgian stuntman Alain Vonks was attempting to do a very dangerous but daring stunt in front of a crowd at the Circuit Zandvoort racetrack in the Netherlands. Basically, he was going to be driving his Chevrolet Camaro through 4 single-decker buses lined up end to end. He had previously attempted the same stunt the year before and failed, so technically, this was supposed to be the second successful attempt. Unfortunately, nothing went as planned. While driving at an incredibly high speed through the buses, it appeared that the second bus was positioned too low, and this caused the roof of Alain's car to be literally sheared off. This fatal mistake basically resulted in a blast, and the car is seen coming up from the other end completely burnt and destroyed. Every horrific moment was captured on camera. As the crew members and medics ran over to the dismantled Chevrolet, a quick look inside the vehicle told them all they needed to know. Alain Vonks was dead. The marshal and one other crew member eventually entered the burnt bus and emerged with a bloody helmet believed to be Alain's decapitated head. The car's collision with the buses completely tore off his head and upper torso. Grizzly Stunt. You see, the 39-year-old Stefan Miller was an experienced animal trainer and stuntman who was asked to film a promo video at a private animal sanctuary in Big Bear, California. The whole idea was to shoot a very short fake wrestling clip with a massive 700-pound grizzly bear named Rocky. The plan was to have Rocky stand on his hind legs while placing his paws on Stefan's shoulders. Stefan was then supposed to do a kind of gentle takedown, and this was something they had both done successfully during rehearsals and training. However, on the day, things went horribly wrong. While filming, Rocky placed his hands on Stefan's shoulders, but instead of the usual practiced routine, the big grizzly bear suddenly lunged and bit Stefan on the neck, crushing his throat in seconds. The whole incident was horrifyingly quick, and before the crew members could come in and stop the attack, it was already too late. Stefan had died almost immediately from the bite. What makes this event so horrifying is the fact that Rocky wasn't just any bear. He was a seasoned performer and had starred in commercials and movies. The bear had even featured in a 2008 comedy called Semi-Pro with Will Ferrell, where he did a wrestling scene. Plus, Stefan was the one who had trained him throughout. Versailles wedding disaster. It was the marriage ceremony of Karen and Asaf Dror, a young couple surrounded by hundreds of friends and family. There were drinks, food, music, and all-around celebrations as the two exchanged vows and tied the knot. But then, during the traditional hura dance, where guests would gather on the dance floor and jump around joyously, the floor quite literally gave out beneath them. Yes, the entire third floor caved in and sent over 300 people 2 stories down. It literally became chaos in a matter of seconds. Friends, family members, and guests could be seen screaming and running around looking for their loved ones in all the rubble. As it turns out, the disaster was definitely inevitable. It was just a matter of time. And sadly, these wedding guests were the unlucky victims. When police carried out their investigations, they found out that the building was way past maintenance. Plus, the building had been constructed with cheap and fake building methods known as pal-cal. What this means is that the lead constructor, Eli Ron, and his team of engineers had used lightweight concrete slabs and metal supports that weren't exactly known for their stability. And it gets worse, because as it turns out, the 3 owners had also asked the builders to add more floors without properly reinforcing the ones below. The whole of the footage was captured by the wedding videographers, and it was horrifyingly real and raw. A total number of 23 people lost their lives, including children, while over 380 were injured with life-altering conditions. But thankfully, justice was served as Eli Ron and 3 engineers involved in the building's construction were sentenced to prison. Rachel Corrie, bulldozer death. In 2003, a 23-year-old woman named Rachel Corrie, who was a committee peace activist, arrived to try and stop Israeli soldiers from demolishing Palestinian houses using non-violent protests. Now, as Corrie got to Gaza, she and her fellow protesters were acting as human shields in front of the bulldozers. They were there with a megaphone, a high-visibility vest, and a strong belief that peaceful protest could make a difference. But as she was still protesting, a bulldozer was still taking down the buildings, and Carrie tripped, fell, and got trapped between the bulldozer and the fence. This is where things get really disturbing. The bulldozer didn't stop, but ran over her, backtracked, and then ran over her again. She was crushed and severely injured with her spine broken and lungs punctured. Unfortunately, she died shortly after in a local hospital. It was a brutal, yet very avoidable death. Rachel's parents flew down to Gaza from the U.S. with a civil claim for negligence against the Israeli Ministry of Defense. However, the court said that Ms. Carey had been protecting terrorists in a designated combat zone. Judge Oded Gershon, presiding at the Haifa District Court, said the bulldozer driver had not seen her, adding the soldiers had done their utmost to keep people away from the site. He even said that Corrie should have distanced herself from the area, as any thinking person would have. However, her colleagues said under oath that it was impossible for the driver in the bulldozer not to have seen Corrie, as she was wearing a very visible coat and had climbed the dirt up to the point of being completely visible. But the judge still ruled that the state of Israel did not have to pay any damages and insisted that Carrie was responsible for her own death. Carrie's parents accused Israel of intentionally and unlawfully killing their daughter and failing to conduct a full and credible investigation. It was just a really sad situation altogether. Young cheerleader tragedy. On the morning of February 23, 2018, 12-year-old Linda Michelita Rogers would be caught in a gas explosion that suddenly went off in her family home on Espanola Drive, Dallas. When first responders arrived on the scene, it was already too late to save the poor girl, as the fire and concrete had already damaged her body beyond repair.
But that's not what keeps them up at night. It's the memory of a girl who didn't have to die.
The saddest part was on that same morning, she had made a video of herself, full of life and ready for her cheerleading competition.
Guys, it is 6:02 a.m. Friday, February 22nd, and I'm gonna get ready for the NCA, National Cheerleaders Association, today.
These were her final moments recorded before her untimely death. Apparently, the gas leak was caused as a result of rusted pipes that were badly corroded and decades old. In fact, just 2 days before this explosion, 2 other gas-related incidents had occurred in that same neighborhood. They were nothing as drastic as what happened on February 23rd. Atmos Energy, the company responsible for the gas supply, was aware of these faulty pipes, yet they did nothing. They eventually admitted fault after facing serious public scrutiny. The company paid a $10 million settlement to the family, but the damage was already done. No amount of money could bring back the sweet girl that was unfairly snatched away from her family. Sonu Jessuals' fatal plane crash live stream. On the morning of January 15th, 2023, 72 people got on board Yeti Airlines Flight 69, a domestic flight in Nepal that took off from Kathmandu and was headed for Pokhara, which is a popular tourist destination. It was supposed to be a routine 27-minute flight, but disaster struck just 18 minutes in. Apparently, the pilots had pulled the wrong lever and accidentally cut off power to the engines. This caused the plane to reach a really low altitude and nosedive straight into a gorge just a few kilometers away from the runway. All 72 people on board died. But the truly terrifying part of this unfortunate accident was the video that circulated online after the crash. A 35-year-old man named Sonu Jessuals was on board the flight and was currently live streaming on Facebook with his friends. You can even hear someone say this is so fun in the background, seconds before everything turns to disaster. Suddenly, the phone shakes violently, there's a loud bang, everywhere goes up in flames, and screams erupt. Then, the screen goes black, but before capturing the final horrifying moments before the plane hits the ground. Nobody has ever witnessed a plane crash from inside a cabin before, so this video really shook the whole world. If you enjoyed watching this, then you should definitely check out this video on the most disturbing movie accidents.